Nearly 5 years after Superstorm Sandy, leaders of the hardest hit municipalities wrestle with the two-headed monster of setting the past to rest and building for the future. Wardley Beach and Seaside captured vast attention, while in Ocean County's southern end, Stafford Township and surrounding border towns quietly regrouped from equally devastating losses. 4,100 properties in Stafford alone. Development that forms the economic foundation of life around Barnegat Bay. That's a double-edged sword at times of disaster. Sandy altered the bay's topography and ecology. Left idle, these changes ultimately threaten the region's environmental, economic, and health-related underpinnings, on which all quality of life rests. Enter Stafford Township Mayor John Spodofora, who knows the terrain like the back of his hand because he lives it. The Army Corps of Engineers is focused on the oceanfront dune and berm restoration. Back Bay issues don't even reach its radar for another couple of years. Mayor Spodofora takes the rare step of developing a much-needed berm system plan, factoring in the superstorm-driven silt that threatens the vital salt marshes, moving that plan up the political chain of command. That brings you to our studio today.
Thank you, Tom.
Mayor, as a guy who knows the entire terrain from the pinelands out to the coast, you've seen this evolution and you saw it accelerate during Sandy. Were components of this plan that you have developed, and it is really deep, were they in the back of your mind anyway, even before the superstorm?
They were. Actually, over the past few years, even a few years before Sandy, I did see some of the things that we're experiencing accelerating today, such as the rise in sea level. It's really causing a big problem. We're losing our salt marsh at a phenomenal rate. Some of the smaller islands in the bay are totally gone because they're totally submerged. And I've watched the trees along the salt marsh dying because salt water has intruded so far into the mainland. The problem is that we cannot continue doing the same things over and over again and expect any different results. We have to step up and recognize how nature protected our environment and how nature worked toward keeping the salt marsh strong, and try to make it work for us again. Let's work with nature to make these things eliminate future flooding and future damage from storms. I'm not looking at reducing flooding. Sea level rise is a very real thing. NOAA just published a very intensive report showing where the sea level is predicted to go. They give multiple scenarios. The worst case scenario is pretty dire. I mean, we'd lose all of Florida, all of Manhattan, we'd lose most of New Jersey. But then there's the other two. There's the moderate and there's the lesser case scenario. Mm-hmm. We need to focus today on what we could do to assure we reach that lesser case scenario. During Sandy, one of the things that we've noticed, and I sent you some photographs of the storm damage we had, and it was pretty obvious that there are certain factors involved. One is the houses that were raised up on piling had no damage, except on the lower levels which had breakaway walls. FEMA's doing a great job in encouraging everyone to raise their houses. That's one part of the problem. Another part of the problem we saw was that the pilings and the trash that came across the bay acted as battering rams, ramming into houses, doing additional damage that we did not have from flooding.
Even the vessels?
Even the vessels, yes. We had boats from Little Lake Harbor, from Atlantic City, crashing through the houses in Stafford Township. We had, according to Rutgers and Stockton University, we had over 5 feet of still water. That's just floodwater on the salt marsh alone. And as you may know, waves ride on top of the still water. So you have 78% of a wave is still water, and the rest of it is the wave above it. Mm-hmm. When I looked at the NOAA gauges, and I compared those against the USGS gauges, and I compared that against the actual damage, and compare that against the FEMA recorded water lines, it was pretty obvious that the waves caused the vast majority of the damage that we had, not just in Stafford, but in Little Lake and Tuckerton and Barnegat and the towns around us. And for that reason, I put together a coalition of mayors. I pulled everybody together and said, we have to fight this, we have to get something done. The other thing that's been happening with the water washing over the marsh is that the marsh is sinking, and it's sinking at a fast rate. And the siltation that used to settle on top of the marsh to help build it up is no longer settling. It's going into our lagoons, it's going into our waterways, tons and tons of silt. So, in looking at all of this and recognizing the damage that's caused by the waves, I came up with a process of utilizing something to reduce the wave action, to mitigate the waves, to reduce the thrust of the waves, the power of the waves. And that is a process that's being used all over the world for building berms and for building breakwaters and everything else. It's called geotubes. And the material for the geotubes would come from the lagoons that are in desperate need of dredging right now from the storm. Some of them in Tuckerton, for example, in low tide, there's no water in them. So the problem is we have a twofold problem. We have lagoons that absolutely have to be dredged, and we have to build something to reduce the impact of waves. So pumping the material out of the lagoons, which has no adverse impact on the bay bottom, putting it in geotubes, building a wall of geotubes will help us mitigate wave damage and at the same time still the waters on the salt marsh and allow the siltation to settle back on the salt marsh so the salt marsh can build itself up. I sent you some data from USGS that shows that 71% of our marshland has been impaired over the years, either by bulkheads or by development. And that's a critical piece of our marshland that a lot of our animals need to nest and to propagate and to thrive. That's just totally disappearing.
And I think it's important to bring that out, just to elaborate a little bit on that, because someone new to the area will look at it and go, well, it's a marsh.
Yeah.
Why are they filling it in and building on it? And there's a much bigger picture behind that.
Very big picture. Certainly back in the 60s, nobody would ever be able to anticipate the problems that we're dealing with today. And for that reason, you can no longer build on a marsh. But the damage is done. We can't go backwards. We need to move forward. We need to say, what can we do now to fix the mistakes we made in the past? And I'm a firm believer that if we can build some of these berms, still the water, build the siltation back up, get the water out of the lagoons so we have a better flushing action, and use those berms to create habitat for the nesting birds and such, we can accomplish a number of things at the same time. And it's creating new habitat, it's reducing the damage from waves, which is the biggest part of the damage that we had along the coast here, and at the same time, of course, it's actually cleaning out the lagoons and everything else. It's just a win-win-win all around.
It's a very thorough plan. My question is, what sort of time frame does something like that take, and what sort of expense factor does it, and how do you fund it?
Well, the funding is, I think, available through various grants. Sandy mitigation grants are out there. There's a number of grants. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a number of grants for doing these types of projects. And the federal government, through the WIN Act, passed in both the House and the Senate, a promise to fund these types of projects, these particular types of projects that will mitigate future damage from things like waves. The technology is out there. It's being used all over the world, never in this type of application. What I've done is taken pieces of different technologies and pulled them together to create something like this. And I am firmly convinced it will absolutely work. And I know that if we can mitigate those waves, we can reduce the damage incredibly, because just still water rising doesn't cause as much damage. The fact is, we can't do nothing. The fact is, the longer we wait to do something, the higher the probability of another storm. With the Sandy, it should have sent a strong message to everyone that we can't continue doing nothing. We have to do something. In Stafford Township, as you mentioned earlier, almost 5,000 homes are along the waterfront, 4,800. Those are 4,800 homes in jeopardy. Start going up and down Barnegat Bay, all of Long Beach Island that's along the bay, all of the towns on the mainland side, and you're talking many tens of thousands of homes that are in jeopardy from another storm like Sandy. I think it behooves us to move forward with this, and I'm dedicated, as I've done in the past. I'll bring this all the way up to the president if I need to. I've done this. I firmly believe that we need to do this, and My wife said I'm like an old dog with a bone. I just don't stop. And I have garnished a lot of interest on this, and the more people that seem to be aware of this and are interested in this, the better I feel about moving forward with it.
You mentioned the inevitable sea level rise, and all of the data past sea level rise leads to those projections for the future, and some of them are dire. A couple of meters by 2100.
Yep.
So how do you respond to somebody who says, look, you know, you're basically throwing a bucket of water at the ocean here. It's inevitable, so why do this now? Why not just let it happen and adjust inward?
Well, it's the old glass half empty or half full theory. These are projections that were put out by NOAA, and it's an extremely good study. It's a very comprehensive study. It's based on a lot of very, very good data. And certainly we've witnessed the sea level rise over the past few years. We've seen what's going on. The fact is there are a lot of variables. One major volcano throwing ash up in the air will cool the Earth down substantially. Tilt of the axis of the Earth. There's many, many things that could change those predictions. But it doesn't mean that we should put our heads in the sand and say, well, by the year 2050, the sea level rise might be up by a full meter. So therefore we shouldn't do anything. I feel we could withstand a 2 or 3 foot sea level rise with the homes on stilts and with the berms in place and deal with flooding. And as the storm goes by, the houses will be intact, the infrastructure will be intact, and people's homes will be safe and people's lives will be safe. So the answer to you is simply this: what do we do for the next 80 some years and say 2050? That's you know, there's a possibility something bad could happen between now and then.
Do we start packing the bags now, or do we entrench? What do we do?
Well, I think we need to entrench, and I think we need to stop playing the games of saying we have to go through all the bureaucracy. We need to cut through that. We need to get past that. We need to put the things in place we need to put in place as soon as possible. It's kind of scary for me to look at these things and say there are solutions and we're going to ignore them. Some people have said to me that have done interviews with me, why not just buy out all these houses that are in danger?
Blue acres.
Blue acres. Well, let's think about that for a second. In Beach Haven West, when I look at them, those 4,100 homes or 4,800 homes, and 4,100 that were substantially damaged, I would say the average home is about $500,000. And let's go back to Long Beach Island again for a second. And what do you think the average home along the bay is worth there? Mm-hmm. Let's look at Little Lake. Let's look at all the towns up and down the bay. You're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. Who's going to come up with the money to buy those homes out? On the other hand, when I'm looking at this dredging project, we've done dredging projects in lagoons before. And typically 80 to 85% of the cost of dredging is the disposal of the dredge spoils, trucking it and disposing it. Now we're not going to have that 85% number. I think that we can do some dredging to open up the high spots and lagoons throughout these towns, have enough material to build the berms, and at the same time save a tremendous amount of money. If we could spend $20 million to get these berms in place, it may sound like a lot of money up front, but how many homes could you buy with $20 million? Not many.
Not many.
Maybe 40, 400? So the answer is, let's figure out how to fix things. Let's not just abandon things. Let's not throw things away.
Let's talk about the bureaucracy for a minute, because sure, you've had to deal with that now at an unprecedented level. I know you've got regional mayors behind you.
Yeah.
You've been very vocal about it. It came to my attention through Senator Chris Connors, mm-hmm, so I know he's sold on it, and so is the whole 9th District delegation. And I'm sure Congressman Lobiondo.
Very sold on it. They're very sold on it.
Okay, so the key here is that you're going upstream, and I'm used to seeing things flow downstream, and we take whatever we get because it's coming from down up there. So, you must have encountered some obstacles here.
Oh, I have encountered a number of obstacles. without question. But I've been through this before, as you know. I've got that stormwater management program in place, and that's now a national standard that we did in Stafford, and got our lake cleaned up, which is the most successful lake restoration project in the nation. Each of these took me going all the way into Washington. It is an upstream battle. There are some people that will sit and say, well, we don't want you putting berms on the salt marsh because some of the microorganisms within the salt marsh could be covered by the berm and it might kill them. And I respond to them saying, you know, if you don't put a berm there, the marsh is going to be gone in a matter of years. It's going to be gone. You're not going to have it at all. Do you want to sacrifice 1 or 2% of the marsh to save the other 99%? That's the answer, and that's what we have to deal with. The bureaucracy is tough. I talked to you earlier about a project that we're trying to push through for truck wash facilities, and that's to reutilize the treated water out of the water treatment plants.
And you've been at that a couple of years now.
Yes, and I'm still fighting that one. And the other project I still have, is the utilization of old deserted cranberry bogs to offset peak flow from the storms going down to the bay, and that would reduce the amount of flooding we have in the bay. There's a number of things. Each one's an uphill battle, but each one can only be beaten by good, solid, scientific and empirical data. So my mission has been to continue to put together good, sound data and make sure that when I go before these people, that I have the data that supports what I'm trying to do.
Did you have any partners or consultants in this mitigation plan that you're
I had,
now?
certainly, there were a lot of people I call and ask questions. The people who manufactured the geotubes, I did ask them a lot of questions, and some of the places they used it, like in Cancun, they put these geotubes out as a breakwater to reestablish the beaches down there that were gone after 2 hurricanes. And I looked at all their data, I asked for it. I had help from Dr. Kenish at Rutgers University. I called him, asked him a lot of questions, tried to understand the pitfalls I was facing. Dr. Hales, from Barnegat Bay,
Partnership.
he's actually obtained some grant money to move forward with some studies on what I'm trying to do. The point is, no one knows it all, and everybody knows a piece. So I like reaching out to as many people as I can. My last meeting with the New Jersey DEP, they were extremely interested. I'll be going up to Trenton to give a presentation to them on the 22nd of this month. So I'm going to keep pushing it forward, and hopefully it's going to result in some significant changes on the bay for the better. Hopefully it'll end up with us mitigating that wave damage that was the big problem that we had, and make everyone a little safer.
It isn't a stretch to say that this plan has actually garnered global attention.
That's true.
It's a dead fact that there are people from disparate corners of the world who are looking at this and saying, how do we apply this? So did you see applications in areas outside of yours?
I looked at applications for these geotubes.
Did you envision it as like, I'm piecing this together from all these different parts, this can be used anywhere?
Yes, yes. When you talk about sea level rise, it's global sea level rise. And other countries are dealing with the same thing. Basically, every state along the coast, from California all the way up our east coast, they're all dealing with the same thing. And as I said, any country that has coastal land has got to deal with this, because when sea level rises, it rises everywhere. So the issue is, how do we control this, and how do we get this to actually work for us in an economical way? So yes, I did have a interview with people at the global level and at the national level, and this project is being, I think on June 1st, will be televised throughout the world.
So we're looking at the usual balance of ecology and economics.
Mm-hmm.
You're a unique individual. You're one of a very few here who actually have a foot in each camp.
That's true.
So you're looking at it from both sides. How difficult is it for you to draw your priorities and say, okay, I need to, such as with the microorganisms, I need to understand that end of it, but I also need to protect this side of it. Mm-hmm. So how do you figure out which takes precedence?
Well, it's a balance. It's always a balance, and the fact is, when I started on this project, I was in a different place altogether. I wasn't using geotubes, I was just talking about doing other things. And as the project has evolved, and my understanding and my research has evolved, I've come up with processes that I think now reach everybody. We can create these berms with very little impact to the marsh, very small footprint on the salt marsh, and we can create them in a manner that would create the uplands that are needed on the marsh for ducks to nest and shorebirds to nest, and we can plant them with indigenous species. And by the way, it's the marsh grasses and trees and shrubs, the indigenous trees that clean the water in the marsh. So we'd be pulling out all the nitrates, phosphates, and nutrients, all of those things that are now creating the algae blooms and a lot of the problems that we have in the bay, but we're also removing a lot of the silt and putting the silt back on top of the marsh instead of in the lagoons or in the bay.
Mayor, where do you take this plan now? I mean, how long do you sit on it before you can actually get to work on it? I mean, you're getting grant money, you're getting nods from upstairs. I mean, who decides the start date?
Well, the start date will probably be decided after the 22nd of this month. I'll be sitting with the New Jersey DEP, their higher-ups, and I want them to shoot bullets at it, see whether they have any issues with it. From that point, our congressman will help us garnish the grant money that's needed. The other possibility is to say, let's do this in one spot and see how it works. Try it for a year and see if it does replenish the marsh, and see if it rebuilds the marsh, and see if it does create enough of a barrier to keep waves down. I'd like to see it done all along Barnegat Bay, but if they still have doubts about it, I will offer Stafford Township up to build the berms just in Stafford Township and let them do a one-year study and see how well it's going to work.
Are there going to be any concerns about disruption of normal activity in Stafford, disruption of the environment while this is going on, if you indeed get it going?
Very good question. That's a great question. The fact is that those questions all can be resolved by doing this stuff in the dead of winter. You don't want to do this in the summer when everybody's trying to use their boats. And there's odors associated with dredging, as you know. But the fact is, it can be done in a very short time frame, going up and down lagoons, taking out this material, it pumps directly into these geotubes, and we cover them up with the material, and then we plant the grasses and shrubs on them. By the spring, it would be totally done, and it would be, as I said, it would look like a natural part of the marsh.
Have you been able to get a rope around the actual cost or even the projected cost?
Well, I'm trying to get a rope around the actual cost. I have a couple of pieces that are still unknown to me, but I would tell you to do Stafford Township and to build all the berms I'd like to build, because I want to do a couple of rows of them. I'm talking around $20 million.
Does it sound doable? I mean, that's...
I am convinced, more than doable, it's a necessity. It's not something that you could say it'd be nice to do. This is something we have to do. We can't keep going the way we are. And I mean, look, we spent probably about $500 million to just replenish dunes on Long Beach Island. And when I talk about saving 5,000 houses from severe damage by spending $20 million, it puts things in perspective.
Yeah, and it also, by the same token, throws development into perspective.
It does.
You have pretty stringent guidelines now about development. Can't develop in the marshes anymore. Those days are over. You call them mistakes. They weren't really mistakes because we didn't know any better.
That's correct.
So in retrospect, they're mistakes. But Stafford is essentially built out.
We are built out. We have a few lots here and there, but nothing else major to come in.
Everything else is either pine lands or has been preserved through the Natural Lands Trust.
We're 47 square miles, and we've preserved 70% of our town as open space up to this point. And we're very aware of the importance of open space and the recharge areas in the open space and everything else. But getting back to your question about money, when Sandy hit, from the damages that we had from Sandy, we lost $200 million of our tax base. $200 million from one storm. Hard for small towns. And multiply that times the number of towns we have along the bay. So it's not a matter of saying it's not economically responsible to do this. It's not economically responsible to not do it is the real answer. We have to do it. We can't absorb this. And when you talk about a $200 million loss in your tax rateables, everybody is driven by taxes. Everybody's driven by the value of a home. Mm-hmm. And your schools, your county, everybody's driven by this. So when you lose all of this tax base, somebody else has to make it up. So everybody else's taxes go up. So if you're living 30 miles inland and you're in the same town or the same county, your taxes will have to go up to make up the loss in taxes that are not happening. You know, you've lost those taxes.
As someone who's basically watched this entire evolution, do you look at the future as a clear road or a high hurdle race? How do you look at it?
I see it as not either way. I see it as manageable hurdles. Look, I have grandchildren. I have children. We have a responsibility toward them. What do we want to leave behind for them? Do we want them looking back at us and saying, well, why didn't they do something? Why did they let this happen? And you know, every year we wait, things are going to be worse. Every year we wait, we're going to lose more and more for salt marsh. Every year we wait, there's a higher probability of a major storm. And we're entering hurricane season now. And who knows what's going to happen? One major storm and we could be back to where we were.
Back to square one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see when and if you get the money. And have you come back and let's get a progress update.
I'd love to have you come down when we're building the berms. And
that would be even better. Better than sitting in a room and talking about it.
Absolutely. I'm very confident that this will be done. I believe in it, and I am going to keep going at it until we can get something done. I think it's a strong enough project, and the benefits are so outweigh the negative side of it that it should be a no-brainer. And you can come down when we're building the berms.
Plan on it.
Okay.
Stafford Township Mayor John Spodofora and the plan to reclaim the land and improve it for the future.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.